I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? So welcome. It's good to see everyone today. I see you're starting our conversation with an inhale. I like that. Ah, Another lovely day. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you, and good to be seen.
All right. New glasses on for those
Yeah.
of our listeners who have decided that they want to come and see us having conversations with each other on our YouTube channel.
Feeling
And
very
Deanne
blessed
is,
to have
yeah,
access to healthcare and access to glasses, and got my prescription updated. So, but they're progressive, so everything's a little wrong
moving
still.
it, yeah,
For
getting used to
48
it.
hours, I'll settle in, but always makes me feel a little drunk as a sober person to have new glasses on. It's like, okay.
Yeah, like I got to get my orientation. Well, that brings up a really good point about like the lenses with which we see what's going on in our world.
Yep.
So 1 week away from election, and everything is excited right now. We have polls that have opened up for early voting.
Yep.
Deanne says that folks are around the corner. I will be leaving the island to cast my vote
Mm.
with my young people. So that's going to be lots of fun when
Oh,
that happens
stateside.
next week. I'm sorry.
You're coming back stateside for that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well,
I
I
know
thought
a lot of
you already
actually, I know a
voted,
lot of
so
people
I
that are
was,
here.
yeah, I thought you had already voted while you were back there before.
There was a vote that we went to do, but that wasn't the
Oh,
actual vote, in
gotcha.
Florida.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So waiting for the polls to open. My young person that's at university did her absentee ballot, so we're waiting for her to get that, so make sure that she can participate as well.
Okay.
And then it's like the question of what's next? What happens after we get the results in? I'm curious if that's like on a number of people out in the US, on US territory, if that's on their mind of what's next, what's going to happen once we get all of the votes tallied, and hopefully every count will be counted, every vote will be counted this election. I come from Florida, where there's always going to be a question about whether each vote is going to count.
Land of the hanging cloud. I'm dating myself.
So, yeah. So, what's next? What are some of the things that you are thinking about in regards to that?
So I haven't voted yet. Early voting just opened in my state. I'm in Connecticut, and it's on my to-do list for this week, but it hasn't happened yet for me. And my daughter, my young person, lives in a state in the South, and early voting just opened for them. And we were just talking this morning about, have you gone yet? When are you going to go? She was asking me if she could wear her keffiyeh to go vote, and I said, of course you should, absolutely. The only thing you can't wear is a campaign button or a campaign shirt, but absolutely wear your keffiyeh. So proud of her for doing that. And yeah, so the algorithm right now is, for me, is all about, I'm seeing a lot of early voting buzz happening in states that opened up. I believe last week Georgia started, and there was some news coverage around the lines being around the block, around the building on the first day of early voting, and it stayed like that all day long. And I haven't heard anything that it slacked off. So North Carolina, the same. I have peeps in North Carolina because that's where I grew up, and the lines have been around the block for early voting since the day they opened, which I believe was this past week. So people are showing up and voting, which I feel like I'm very excited to see. I'm excited to see that engagement in the electorate. I'm excited to to know that maybe we haven't seen this level of enthusiasm in the past. And so you and I have talked about how our electorate being ambivalent and apathetic is never a good thing. It's why, the powers that would like to disassociate us from our voice being heard have really won in maybe ever of voting in this country because of the disenfranchisement and the apathy that has come with that. So really glad to see that. But I do wonder, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, about whether or not we're seeing the enthusiasm around early voting happening because people are afraid or worried or have some level of trepidation about impending violence that could happen on election day. And so I haven't done any exit polling, so I have no idea why people are showing up early, but my guess is that's playing a factor.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. What type of voter are you? Are you typically an early voter, or do you wait for election day when you're
Question.
doing this?
I have typically been an election day voter, and this will be, I have voted early in the past. I used to live in a state in the South Carolina, and I worked the polls. I didn't work two times. I've worked the polls, so I early voted them because I was going to be busy on election day. And then there was another time where I gave people rides. I was an Uber driver at the time, and so
Yeah.
I intentionally, was like available to drive people to the polls all day long. So those two times I early voted because I had something going on that day and wanted to make sure I voted in. But I feel like I'm an early voter this time for a different reason.
What's the reason?
I want to get it done. I want to get it in and locked and and pull that lever or fill in that circle early so that I know it's done. But also too, election day, I'm not quite sure what election day is going to be for me, and we're going to talk about how you and I are going to spend some time live on election day. So I want to get it done. It feels super important to me to because I don't know what's coming, and I want to make sure it's registered. So,
Yeah. I don't know what's coming. That's the thing that I imagine is lurking in everybody's mind. Like, what is it going to be? What are the outcomes? What are the results going to be? I'm typically a election day voter, and the reason why I choose to do it like on election day is that I feel like that's the only way to actually, and I don't want to put any misinformation out there at
mhm,
all, but that's what I feel is like what really gets counted. Um, it's just the psychology of my mind. It's like on election day when you go in there,
gotcha.
it's registered that on that date, somebody went in and cast a vote. So that's the mysticism of my voting practice. And so I don't, and because I have to like make a plan to like actually travel over, I don't know if it's going to be on November 5th exactly, or if it will be before that time. So that'll be like a new experience for me as well. And I'm curious to see what's happening in Florida in regards to safety around voting, because there's always something that
Mhm,
we can anticipate happening with lines or going to some of the larger voting precincts.
mhm,
So yeah, so curious about what that's going to look like. But also, I feel like this is an exciting time because the the larger narrative is about saving our democracy and participating in the election during this time or choosing not to participate in the election really does speak to what we can expect from what our democracy is going to look like after this vote. And I'm sure that the entire globe is watching our behavior because we know that like international elections can become really violent and kind of wild. And we haven't seen that here in the US other than our last presidential election. We haven't seen that type of like outright physical violence. And so there's a lurking concern about what that looks like.
right.
And so also a conversation about what we can do to try to quell some of people who might be feeling like they want to react in some way after the election.
Mhm,
Uh, so yeah, those are some of the things I'm thinking about, and I'm excited because you and I met through a relationship working with the Peace Alliance. And it always makes me think about what are the things that we can do to advocate for nonviolence and the way that we move and communicate and love on each other and continue to exist in our world.
Mhm.
And so we have had discussions about a proposal of an idea that I have, and I've run it through some of my more experienced organizing activists in community here with some really good and distinct questions
Mhm.
that I think are important for us to be thinking about, especially as we build out campaigns. And when you and I were talking about this, it's like, oh, what is the impact that we really have when we get out there and march and be present and have a mass of people coming together for a specific purpose and a cause? And so thinking of the period of time from post-election day, so November 6th, Wednesday, November 6th, as we're still waiting to hear some of the results and we know where we're going to be finding out that additional votes have to be counted and coming in, all the way up through inauguration day, and also knowing that we now have this kind of, not kind of, we have this history of January 6th being a very traumatic day from our last presidential election. What are the things that we can do as community in mass, nationwide, to really speak into the fact that we want a peaceful transition of power? And so the campaign is just that, peaceful transition of power. And it's getting out on the streets, getting out in community, communicating with folks and letting folks know and getting excited about peaceful transition of power, regardless of who it is that is placed into the office. And some of those things can look like, continued marches.
Mhm.
They can look like having dinners together in community. They could look like passing out love pamphlets or hugs at the grocery store. But really speaking into this messaging of let's keep being present and visible about what our values are. You were speaking to this, right? Standing in your values, stepping towards our values, and keep making sure that people know that the larger demographic of us want a peaceful transition of power so that we can maintain the fabric of our nation.
Right.
Does that sound like really crazy presidential? But that's really what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah.
not, yeah. And do we want to maintain, because you speak to this a little bit, do we want to maintain the fabric of our nation, or do we want to be weaving a new fabric for our nation and doing that with this energy and this movement towards a peaceful transition of power? Yeah.
Whew. I am I'm hot. I'm like my chi is like, ooh, all of that. So much of what you said really resonated with me. And we've talked offline and online about what's happening in the world and is it possible to reform what we're dealing with, or do we need to reimagine what we want this to be? There's a lot to be, we say we want to preserve our democracy. We actually don't live within a democracy. We live in an oligarchy as it is set up now. And I think for myself, I've really learned more about that in recent years and realized that we may be calling it something, but it's really something different. And so the easy way to say it is we want to preserve our democracy. But I think I'm remembering actually what's coming up for me is the poem that Amanda Gorman read for us during the inauguration in I guess it was 20 was after the 2020 election, so 2021 at the inauguration, where she talked about how we may not be a more perfect union, but we can still strive for that, right? We don't have to, it's okay to accept that we're not doing things well. And when we can do that, then we can say, okay, how can we make it better? So I guess I said all that to say what I would love to see for those of us between this in between space, right? From the election, the day after the election actually occurs, and we're waiting for the results to come in to, like you said, we now know what January 6th day is. There's a December day that's very important in terms of final declaration of the counts of the votes. And then there's January 6th where they get certified. And then there's inauguration day. So there's these pivotal moments between election and inauguration where we have seen how it can devolve, and we can see, and I think we would be fooling ourselves to think that violence is not going to occur at some level in that time. And so how can we stand in the truth of that and the knowing of that and say, I'm going to put my feet where my mouth is. I'm going to put my feet where my values are and say, I'm going to stand for nonviolence during this time. And I'm going to stand in the space of wanting to be a part of the movement that says peaceful transfer of power is important. Because, and as a person that looks like me, I need to remember that there are going to be communities out there that are going to suffer in that violence, likely more so than a community that looks like me. Although it does impact me, I'm not saying it doesn't touch me. It hurts all of us. And
Mm.
there's a different level maybe of insecurity, and a different level of vulnerability maybe in different communities. And how can we stand together, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, hand in hand, and not in the kumbaya space? I'm not going there. It's not about hands across we intentionally setting a purposeful space for nonviolence in that space of time. That to me is like the really important what's next. The voting is voting, but then we can't just turn it off as much as we
Hmm.
want to. We're all exhausted by the ads and by the hate and the vitriol and the violence that is escalating, that we are seeing in that's rising up. We're all tired of that, and we need to stay energized, and we need to stay motivated and connected to each other in that space of time. And I that's what came up for me when I heard you talk about this campaign that you've been kind of birthing and thinking about.
Well, I love hearing that thought partnership about it. Because it makes it exciting if it's something that people definitely resonate with and understand and recognize what the need is, especially in this moment in time. And the more stories we can talk about people coming together,
Right.
to your point, and the more we can amplify that we really want this to be a nonviolent transfer of power. I hope that that also is motivation for anybody who is that agitated to be in any type of violent response, to see that there's a mass of folks that are not in the same place that you are. So you're not going to have a lot of people joining you in
Mhm.
your agitation, is what the hope is. And then also to be able to have like dialogues as to what the agitation is so that we can come to some solutions. Like working through the conflict is going to be a critical component of like how we develop a new fabric. And that's also being authentic and honest about what our fabric is today,
Mhm.
right? What it's looking like as we're going into this election, what our needs are so that we can, be clothed in the goodness of our of our um of our culture. And I say that with like a little wince of a hints of a uh, recognizing that my experience in the United States has moments of goodness where you see communities coming together after, tragedy, trauma, weather, or
Right.
things like that. And so
Mhm.
to tap into that part of our fabric and not the other parts, not the oligarchies and the capitalism and the racism and systemic oppression, all of the things that are also a part of our fabric, to be able to name them and then to be able to develop up new visions and ideas of how we can operate and exist together in a different way. And I do think that that is a catalyst to that is starting this end of the year and going into the period of time before we have a new person in office,
Mhm.
really amplifying those values and that priority during that time. Because we've spent all of this time talking about the legislative priorities that we are hoping that the person in office really focuses on. But what is it that we're going to do in community to support what we're asking the office to do so that we're all working like in this ecosystem together for some really strong transformation?
Yeah, what
You
comes
know?
up for me with that is just that concept of we vote and then we disappear. It's like we vote
Mm.
and we and I'm talking about I'm it's not all of us for sure. And those of us in the privileged class tend to disappear quicker than others, but we can stay engaged, and we it's not just about vote and disappear. It's vote and then hold accountable. It's vote and then feet to the fire. It's vote and then work together. There's an after that I think our electorate doesn't often remember, that's part of this process. We don't get to go, phew, it's
Mm,
over, we can all go back to, we have to stay engaged. And there are
that's it.
communities that stay engaged all the time.
Yep,
And so
that's
I
it.
get that I'm talking to my peeps right now. I'm talking to people that it's easier to just do the thing and then disappear, because what you think happens next doesn't impact you. But I'm here to tell you it does. If you look like me, you need to listen to this, as a white cisgendered woman, that it does impact us, and we have to want to stay intentional and authentic about what the what's next looks like. It has to have movement, and it has to have intention behind reforming. And people have heard me say we need to tear it down. I do believe we do. I don't believe our
Mhm.
system works the way it's set up right now. It works for some, very few, and does not work for others. In fact, inflicts harm every day, every minute of every day. And so I believe we need to tear it down, but not because I just want to burn things. It's not that. It's we need to find that next, what's next. And until we get exhausted with what we've been dealing with and really see the harm it's causing to others, then we can say, okay, I want to work shoulder to shoulder with those that want to do it. And so the other point I wanted to make real quick was the the forces that are agitated. You were talking about the agitation. Those folks that are agitated or are going to be agitated are not necessarily the majority. They're just the
No, for
loudest
sure.
right now. And so,
Hmm.
how can we, those of us that want to show something different, that want to stand in our values and say, we want this peaceful transfer of power, we want to reimagine what this country can maybe be for the first time in its 400 years, we are bigger than them. We're just not louder than them. So we need to amplify. And that's what I wanted to just say out loud.
Let's get to being louder than them, right? Because when
Yeah.
there's a large enough mass, then we can.
Yes.
And then also holding like, our news media and all of that to the fire, giving them some stories to talk about, right? So the more mass of people come out, doing a specific action, we're talking about, everyone lighting a candle on January 6th, a white candle for peace as a reminder of
Mhm.
our last election, but two, as like a symbol of the hope that we have for what is next in our future. uh, and just the opportunity to like share those stories of like when people do come together and you come together from completely different perspectives, completely different experiences, and start having conversations, then you do get to some of the solutions of what it could look like. Because that's the thing, right? If we're talking about transformation or reformation in specific institutions, being able to identify and know what it is that we are going
Mhm.
to change to
Yeah.
is critical, right? If people don't change unless they have an idea of what it is they're changing
But if
to.
we, but, but,
Um,
but if we can't imagine that yet, it's okay. We
it's
have to make
okay
the
for sure.
space for that reimagining to happen. And there are people that will go, well, I don't know, the familiar is safer than the unfamiliar or
Then the
the,
unfamiliar.
and so it's like, it's okay. Join hands with community that wants to reimagine what this country could possibly, maybe, if we ever get honest with ourselves, become.
Mhm.
And let's do it together, because
Let's explore.
this violence impacts every single one of us. It impacts
Mhm.
the gun violence, the interpersonal violence, the racial violence, the religious violence. All of it impacts all of us. And but we are the ones that are going to change it, not the people that are sitting in this Oval Office somewhere, removed from that.
Yeah.
They serve a purpose, but they're not it. We're it. We can do this
Mhm.
together. So yeah, that's what gets me all jazzed up, so, as you can tell.
Yeah. And then and we are talking like we're talking about peace, and most of us experience it as a theory, right? Because it's we haven't gotten to actually
Sustainable
be
for-
in peace. We're and in this moment in particular, with all of the violence and genocide and harm that's happening across the globe,
Mhm.
that's impacting all of us. Like, so we're seeing the impact of what violence does.
Right.
And if people are not understanding like how it's impacting us, there are people here who are losing family members and friends as genocide is happening, not in Gaza, not just in Gaza, but in all of the places that it's happening.
Mhm.
So there's that component, but then it also is driving the direction of this election and how people are deciding whether or not they're going to show up
Mhm.
to the poll, who that they can vote for, whether or not they want to vote, because they're watching people participate
Mhm.
and collude with continuous genocide and harm. So those are like the real testaments to impact. And we know that through the history, I'm saying that we know by looking at historical times when there has been transition of power, that has always happened with violence.
Yeah.
So this really is the opportunity for us to be able to use the very many tools that we have now to
Mhm.
really try to push and shift our current state of the way that we're existing in this moment.
Yeah.
And so it's up to all of us. Well, I want to mention that on November 2nd, the Women's March is convening folks in DC, but then all across our nation, there are springs. So folks go to the Women's March website, you'll be able to see if you want to getting in the ground, meeting a new group of people who are going to be out in the streets,
Yeah.
speaking into what's important in their local communities, because that's the way that I'm actually seeing it being organized.
Mhm.
Um, and then that being like kind of the motivating catalyst to continue to stay engaged. I think I like that hashtag. So all right, if we hear stay engaged, y'all, we know where we came from, like where it came from. But staying engaged, right? Keep on moving, keep on showing, keep on like you do the thing that you choose to do on election day. My hope is that it's going into the ballot box and making some decisions all the way down ballot, right? It's very
Yeah.
critical to be doing that as far as your local representation, because those are the ones that you feel directly. Those are the ones that you can feel like day 10 after election day happens, rather than
Very
waiting for
important.
inaugurations
It's
and
a
the 100. Yeah.
loss in a
So that's
presidential.
real.
They're very important, almost more.
Very, so
Yeah.
important. And then continue to stay engaged. And there will be an opportunity. We'll make sure that you learn about the campaign as it's launched and opportunities to stay engaged in your local communities. I think that that's going to be critical. And then making friends with people that just don't look like you or don't have any type of experience or perspective that you do is going to be really critical in us envisioning and imagining and then concretely creating this new world that we would love to have.
Yes. Yes. And I want to say real quickly before we finish that we have decided to go live on
That's right.
election day. Why do I
Hey,
get
hey.
yeah, it's time. It's time. It's time to have a conversation that that is in the moment. And so, but stay tuned for that. We'll let you know like when and how and all of the details. We're hoping to have some surprise guests join us for the conversation on the live show to talk about all things. But that's going to be on Election Day on November 5th in the U.S. So, so for those of us, we have quite a few folks that listen outside of this country. We invite you to find us live on Election Day and join the conversation and get connected to stay engaged.
Hey, stay engaged, y'all. Stay engaged.
Hashtags.
We'll see you on election day.
Yep. See you then.
All right. Bless.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks
I
for
give
joining
a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard?
continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck
Why do
is
I
produced
give
in
a
collaboration with Johanna and Deanne. Music by Norwegian musician
care so
Water.
much?
See you next time.
Why do